off again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on that.
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters. It is the 5-minute rant. Normally we're on a Monday night, but we thought, especially after the match last night, I thought we could all do with a little bit of therapy ourselves. And as always, joined by Pete. Chris couldn't make it on tonight, so we've got Nathan from the NUFC Matters Worldwide panel. So good evening, lads.
Evening.
Good to see you. And wow, I think we've just been discussing off air. I think we're all surprised that we didn't wake up this morning to some yellow ticker tape, Nathan, along Sky Sports News announcing that Steve Bruce had left the building.
That was a sentiment, wasn't it, last night from a lot of the North East journalists. I know they've all been very critical of Bruce, but I don't think any of them have gone as far as to say he needs to go now, and that was a sentiment shared by all of the journalists last night, wasn't it? So when they come together like that and when they have that narrative out there, usually they tend to sort of they've either heard something or that's sort of something that's in the works and something that's happening. So to wake up this morning, had a bit of a lie-in this morning, but to wake up and there's reports of Ashley standing by his man, it was. I want to say it was shocking, but it's unsurprising as well at the same time. Yeah,
Tom Lynch saying absolutely sickened by last night's result and by the fact that Bruce isn't getting sacked. Yeah, it's shared by everybody, I would say, in the fan base. If you want to come on and join myself, Pete and Nathan today, you've got an hour to do it. The link is in the description box below. You simply click on the link and you come on to the show. You've got 5 minutes, get your point across. We'll have a chat with you and then we'll move on to the next caller. If you don't, it'll be me, Pete and Nathan, and I'm sure we've got plenty to discuss tonight. So if you don't feel brave enough to come on, I'm sure we'll be able to entertain you for the next hour. But please try and get on. It's always good to see you. If you've been on before, don't put yourself off. Get yourself back on. It's always good to listen to the fans. This is your platform, your chance to get your opinion across. We've got a question, Pete, straight away from Bede. He says, question for all of us. What do you make of the group of players within the squad demanding to speak to Lee Charnley on how we stop this slide towards relegation? And again, we were speaking about that before we came on air. I haven't wasted me Sunday today. I've had a day off, but I've been catching up with these Amazon Prime programs that everybody keeps talking about. I've been watching All or Nothing, but I've been watching the Spurs one first. So I've not really seen any of the press. I've been trying to avoid anything to do with Newcastle United today, including Twitter. But yeah, what do you make of that question? And have you seen something about that today, Pete?
Yeah, I mean, they talk about it before we went on air, and it's come from Football Insiders saying that the players are looking to have a word with Lee Charnley because they're not happy. I think it says a lot that they thought, like all the North East and national journalists, thought that Bruce wouldn't be in the job by 6 p.m. tonight, and he still is. I think it's absolutely baffling, and I think it's got to that point where I think it tells you a lot about where the squad of players are at right now. The squad of players know that in order for them to have any chance of staying in this league, that they need him gone. And it's getting to the point where, if the players are going to Lee Charnley or certainly looking to do that, that says everything you need to know about where this squad of players and where our club is at the moment. And you know what? I encourage them to do so because it's 6:05 p.m. Right, and I said it last night. I wanted him gone by this time, and I'm pissed off that he's not gone at this point. He should be out the door. He should be gone by now. We should be looking for his successor right now, and we're not. So if it takes the players to push that through to ensure that he's no longer the manager of Newcastle United, then I say continue. Please do keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, a lot of people messaging in as always. Darren Cowan says enough of blaming Bruce. The players should be ashamed by that performance. I mean, Nathan, I understand the sentiment from Darren. I wholeheartedly do. I think last night was the gloves were off on our panel. Usually Pete and I are fairly straightforward. I know you are when you're on as well. Some of the others can sit back sometimes and not hold back. Martin again let fly last night. I let fly at certain players. I did on social media after the game, and I think that was all justified. I think Darren has got a point. You know, the players do need to take responsibility, but some of the players that would like to take responsibility aren't getting picked by Bruce, and those that are getting picked, they're getting picked and played in the wrong position.
Yeah, I think there is some truth to that they you know, there's been times throughout the season where the team needed to do better and needed to try more. I think if they've decided amongst themselves, you know, this last 2 months have been particularly turbulent for the squad, with all the issues around like Matt Ritchie. There's issues around the long staffs, the way that Carl Darlow was handled after, you know, that was handled unprofessionally, the way that he found out about being dropped after coming in and doing quite a good job for the entirety of the season. So I think those divisions run really deep in the squad now, and I think it is beyond repair. And I think what as we all saw it, like coming into the international break, and the players probably aware of it as well, that it's a really good natural time to get that. To get him gone and to get someone else in and get time to work with the players. It's a perfect timing for it. And the fact that it looks like we're going to sort of pass that by and we're going to keep him as manager, it tells you everything you need to know about where the hierarchy are sitting and what's on their minds at the moment. So I do take on board that the players need to have done more. I think they've been horribly mismanaged for a season, and it can't be inspiring for them to turn up to work and to have to work with this guy week in, week out, day in, day out, even because he's just shown himself to be absolutely inept. I think there was a bit of an upturn when Graham Jones came in, and I think I'm firmly of the belief that Graham Jones' influence came in, and I think we saw that influence in the first 2 weeks, and then I think we saw Graham Jones in the stands for the following weeks, and you know, only on the touchline for one half. I'm firmly of the opinion that he's been sort of throttled somewhat by Bruce and kind of like, you know, dampened down a little bit. And I think his influence has kind of waned over the previous weeks, because I think he's been put in a box by Bruce and told not to get involved. So I think there's probably an element of that as why the players don't want to play for him too. But, you know, I stand by the players. I don't think there's any point wasting another match on Bruce, but it's disappointing that they sort of down tools and didn't even try in a game where we could have won. But again, if we win, does he stay? He stays another week, another 2 weeks, another 2 games, and then I don't know. Now's the time to make a change, but it's always disappointing to see the players not work for that shirt. But yeah, I'm firmly with them on that. We need to get him gone ASAP.
Yeah, a lot of the players just aren't standing up and playing for Bruce. Other people, we've said this. You know, you've done every match day live with me this season, and it's you know, it's woeful at times watching it. And some of the players they don't care, do they? I mean, some of them aren't even troubling the laundry lady, because just be sticking them back on the peg and they'll be ready to use the next game.
Yeah, exactly that. You know, it's been, as a fan, it's been heartbreaking seeing some of these performances. I think the only thing that's kind of got me through it, and I know quite a few others as well, is the fact that we have had the match day live to be able to talk about it and sort of use it as a bit of therapy to really get through those 90 plus minutes, because it's just horrible to watch. But you look at some of those players, you know, there were two matches that really stand out for me this season, and it's the Sheffield United away, and it was last night, and they were both performances, in my opinion, of let's get the manager sacked. And that's just my opinion. They are two distinctive performances where you know, and I said it last night, after 2 or 3 minutes, you knew what was coming. You knew that we were never ever getting anything out of that game whatsoever. And the lack of effort, the lack of passion, just had literally written all over it that they just want the manager gone. And I think the Football Insider report coming out this afternoon, and you know, the absolute sort of like shock that Bruce is still not been sacked yet. I think all of that is coming together on the back of last night, because I think they don't believe that they have a manager right now that's capable of keeping them in the league. And that's just it. But even more, I think it goes beyond that as well, because, you know, takeover and arbitration aside, I don't believe that these group of players want to be playing under this manager, even if we do stay in the league going into next season either. And I think they've got that in mind too. So they're thinking, you know, right, do we take a hit on one of these big games in order to really raise the profile that something's not right at this club, so the club are forced into making the decision? And I think they've done that twice now. and still, for some reason, I have no idea why. And I sent you something earlier, Steve, and I have no idea why Steve Bruce is still in this job. But he reminds me, if you've ever watched a film called Old Yeller, Steve Bruce is Old Yeller, who is a dog that has rabies, that it just refuses to be put down. And he needs to be put down. He needs to be out of this club. He needs to be gone. And the quicker that happens, the better it is for our club and our future.
I wondered what that was, but now I get it.
It's an old American film in the 50s, and a lot of Americans use it as when a person or somebody is just needs to move on, and it needs to finish, and he's a perfect example of that, as someone that just refuses to be put down, that needs to be put down out of his misery. And that's not just as a Newcastle manager, that's just as a manager in professional football. He's just done. He's done it. He's done it professional level. He just needs to go and be a pundit, earn a little bit of money on Match of the Day, and be done with it.
Yeah. Got David Reed joining us in a couple of minutes. Chaff says, is there anything the fans can do? Social distance, protest outside St James's Park at the Sprouts game. I mean, we saw this last night, of course. War flags again, getting a point across and getting our point across, calling him a coward. You are not one of us, leave now. Can't make it any clearer, can we, as supporters? But Nathan, is there anything that fans can do? I mean, we've discussed it before on the show. We can't protest at this moment in time because, we've got to socially distance. We've got to stay away from the ground. I think it would just be pointless. I don't think there's anything we can do unless we're allowed back in the ground.
Yeah, I think what we're going to be careful of is that what we saw at the end of last season when Liverpool won the league and all their fans were outside, they got absolutely lambasted for it. And Liverpool fans, like Newcastle fans, are quite a sort of free-for-all target from a lot of the media and one thing and another. I think that if we do some sort of protest, we were talking about this last year when the takeover was sort of falling through and the campaigning against the Premier League and one thing and another, and any talk of protest, it would have just made us look even worse than they already sort of view us already. But one thing I would say is that it's taken a hell of a long amount of time. But as we saw last night, sort of the media are turning now, and they've sort of fully turned on Bruce. And I think there was Jeff Stelling said last night, he tweeted, don't have any Newcastle fans, but now I think I finally get it. There was a whole segment this morning on Sky Sports News where Craig Hope was on and Darren Lewis, I think it was, and they were just talking outwardly and openly that it's time for Bruce to go. And it's not like Sky Sports News to have a segment on with someone like Craig Hope where Craig Hope comes on and basically says it's time for him to go, that's it, enough's enough. They don't usually give that kind of airtime to us to say things like that. So that's one thing I would take some sort of solace from. I think that the media are kind of in agreement now that his time is up. And what I wouldn't be surprised to see is all the usual suspects on TalkSport this week, like the likes of your Danny Mills and your Danny Murphy and those kind of players that just talk shit all week about Newcastle. It wouldn't surprise me if they finally are on board as well this week when they get some airtime.
Yeah, I got offered a chance to go on TalkSport today, but 11:30 tonight, I'll be in bed. I said I'm not that desperate to talk about Newcastle United, so good luck to whoever has to do the night shift tonight. I'm going to bring in David Reed. We've got Mark Henderson waiting as well. So David, good evening.
Hello lads, how are you doing?
Very good, mate. Nice to see you. Good to see you. Go on then, David. You've got 5 minutes, mate. Get your points across and we'll discuss them for you.
Right, just 2 words from last night. Awful and appalling. Also, Kraft went home because he's injured, and that's no different to ASM. I want to bring some levity to this. I don't want to be negative, and I don't want to cover the points everybody else will make. I just want to say a few hypotheticals when a takeover happens. 1, who do you want as manager? 2, who would you have as our first signing? 3, do we move from St James's Park or build a new stadium? And that's
Wow. Who wants to tackle that first? Pete?
Just say them again because I just need to.
Pete, I'll go for him. I wrote them down, Pete. I'm on the ball. And right, so you said about like the takeover, when the takeover goes through. That for me is something that sort of wanes and wanes for me on a week-on-week basis because the more likely we are to heading towards relegation. I think we've got to come up against that issue of Ashley renegotiating a price, and I think that's going to be a whole new saga to this. But we'll not get into that for this moment. For which manager would I want? I'd want Rafa back. I think he's talked about coming back to the Premiership. Thinking of the report today, I'd have Rafa back. I think he's got unfinished business. Whether he's the person to take us, for the next sort of 5-6 years, I think he's got a couple of years in him to finish what he started on and get us on that path. Because I think he'd be great for the rebuild, and I think he'd be exactly the man you want to set the foundations for, whoever may take over in sort of 3, 4, or 5 years' time. And for a signing, I'd really like what's it called? A dream signing would be like get Lewandowski in for a laugh, because if we've got that much money, it doesn't matter, we'd get him in, because I think even though he's ticking on a bit, the goals he's banging this season, he's unstoppable, isn't he? So yeah, that'd be my answers to your questions.
Okay, Pete, have you had time to think?
Yeah. Look, with regards to a manager, it's an easy one really. Like saying they've said Rafa Benitez, but actually in reality, we've got the pick of anybody, because with those sort of, and it sounds really silly saying this, but they are in professional football terms unlimited resources with regards to how much money they have in comparison to anybody else. We could get anybody with our project, with our potential to come and manage this club. But Rafa Benitez would be the natural one. I've always talked about it in phases, and I talked about it, on Geordie's Down South with the other two lads, with from being with Clinton. I mentioned there's a sort of a 3-phase period here when the takeover goes through, and the first period would be with Rafa Benitez. He knows the club. He could rebuild the club in his own vision, with the training ground, with the playing staff, with all the fundamentals you need if you want to rebuild a club, and that would be seen over the 3 to 5 year period. And then what you do at that point, because you've built yourself up, you then can go for another elite manager to take on the reins. And that's where you've got the pick of the bunches. You've got your Pochettinos and anybody above that that are regulars at winning trophies, and you bring them to the club. And then after that, you can build and build and build. With regards to who I would sign, who I think would be a realistic signing under the new ownership, there's a few out there. I've always said, for me, in a realistic signing, someone we could get straight away that would make a difference to our team. Someone like a Wilfried Zaha, who's at a Palace. You could bring him in and put him on the wing. For me, I'd be ambitious and go for someone like Jack Grealish. If another top team doesn't put the money in, we can certainly compete with that. And the difference is that we'd be able to sell a project. We'd be able to sell a project of something that we would realistically be able to challenge for in a few years' time. And I think if you can see that, I think he'd be sold on it. So for me, they're the two players realistically that I think we could go in for, and have the money to really kind of put a marker down to say we're here and we're ready to go big with that.
Yeah, okay. Well, I would bring... obviously, people know I'm a big fan of Rafa. I know he's not a popular choice among some of the fans, but I think short term to start the project off, I think he'd be the right man. I think he's got the fans' trust, majority of the fans' trust. I think it's his football that puts a lot of people off. The fact that he played defensive, and he didn't really. It's not going to be as cavalier as Keegan. However, the bloke got results, and he would also tackle the academy. I think that's a good thing. As far as who would my dream signing be, it's got to be a number 9. It's got to be Harry Kane. If no money was the object, you need a good goal scorer, and Harry Kane coming to Newcastle would also mean that if he gets if he beats the Premier League's top goal scorer thing, he's a Newcastle United player. So I would take him. And what was the other point you made? What was the other question?
Do we move from St James's Park or build a new stadium?
Been through that as a fan base before, and it's the last thing we need is more divisiveness. There was hell on when people were even suggesting it. Absolute hell on, and Save Our Seats campaign was the same when people got moved around the ground. I think anything like that would be an absolute nightmare. It would have to be really something that, yeah, it would just take so much to persuade the fans to leave St James's Park.
How do we expand the stadium?
You can build on the east stand. It would need to be completely knocked down. When I was fans liaison officer at the club, I saw the designs for it. The university would be quite happy to sell the listed buildings to the club behind the east stand. However, the frontage of those buildings would need to be incorporated within the new stand that was built. So we could get away with it. It would be more costly to build that stand and to incorporate the frontage which is listed into the stand. Would probably cost the same amount as it would cost to build a new stadium. That's the ludicrous side of it. But if we wanted to stay there and we wanted to build the capacity on the Gallowgate and knock the stand down at the Leazes and build there, it is possible, it is doable, but it depends on, you know, who's financing it and whether they would feel it was right. The other problem is as well, we don't own our own ground. It's a lease. We don't actually physically own St James's Park. So again, you know, it has to be rubber stamped by the council because they own the lease. Crazy, really, in this day and age that we don't own it. Would I be up for going? Would I be up for moving? When John Hall suggested it, if they could prove to me that it was going to be beneficial for the football club, then you would have to look at it. You know, if the Saudis came in with all their money and they said, this is what we're going to do, this is our plans, we're staying in Newcastle, but it's going to be here, this is the future, we're going to have a Man City type, you know, second stadium, if you like, with like an 8,000 capacity for the reserve team and the academy, etc. You know, that's the kind of thing we'll be dealing with Saudi investment, I think. I don't see
the need. I don't see the need to move. Well, 52,000 fans in that stadium, and if it wouldn't take a massive extension to get it up to 60, 70,000. And to be honest,
you can build on the Gallowgate.
Yeah, to be honest, if you're hitting 75, 80,000 like Old Trafford, you don't need anything more than that, in my opinion. I think, you know, you're filling that every week, and that's going to earn your money. I don't think you need a brand new stadium. I just don't see it. It's a historic stadium. It's been built up from nothing to what it is right now. Why would you want to just get rid of that?
But 52,000 isn't the whole fan base.
Sorry?
52,000 isn't the whole fan base.
But you could say that about any club. You could say it about any club, but any club's capacity is not their whole fan base. Maybe apart from Sunderland, but other than none of them are. So you're not going to fit a whole fan base into a stadium. But what you do want is to create an atmosphere. St James's Park on its best day has the best atmosphere in the Premier League, bar none. Right, fans of opposition clubs, players of opposition clubs, managers of opposition clubs across England and Europe have mentioned it. When that stadium is bouncing, there is no better place to be. It's like a fortress at times on its own, and the fans create that. Why would you want to go somewhere else?
You can't create another atmosphere at another ground.
Well, you look at Arsenal, for example. Arsenal, you cannot create an atmosphere there. It's horrible. If you've ever been to the Emirates Stadium, right? The way that stadium is built, it is absolutely ruined. You cannot build an atmosphere in there. You ask Tottenham Hotspur fans, right? You ask the Spurs fans going into that new stadium. It is an elite, brand new stadium, which is amazing.
Bayern Munich.
Okay, Bayern Munich. Granted, you can build an atmosphere in there. It's a very good stadium. But you look at some of these other modern new stadiums, it is very hard to build an atmosphere in there. Newcastle can still have an amazing cauldron of an atmosphere in that stadium, and you can still expand on it. There's no need.
It doesn't matter.
If you ask any West Ham fan as well, if you ask any West Ham fan, they'll all want to go back. They'll all go back to Upton Park in a shot. And the thing is, everyone says about our atmosphere at St James is the best in the Premiership when it's bouncing. But what you've got to remember about this, if the takeover does go through and we end up in a position where we can be successful, it'll be bouncing every single week, unlike now where it's, where if the fans are in it, it'll be flat.
Wherever we are.
Yeah, it's great. Hey, listen, great points to bring up, David. I mean, it's good to get with thinking. Go on, David, before we bring Mark in.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer the 3 questions that I posed.
Okay, well, I'll give you my answer about the stadium. So, Nathan, would you move stadiums?
No, I wouldn't. No.
Pete?
No chance.
Okay.
All right, David. Hey, great stuff, mate. And
just answer.
Yeah, go on.
Quickies. Sorry, I know I've been on longer.
Don't worry.
Who do I want as manager? I'd give Keegan a 3rd chance. Unfinished business. And my star signing would be Marcus Rashford.
Okay, Keegan would be a popular choice. I think upstairs would be the best place for Kevin, coming in as an ambassador of some kind for the club, and I think he would do that at a shot. I think Shearer would do the same, by the way. Rashford, I think you could do better, but I think why settle for Rashford if we could get Kane? I think he'd be the best choice, but it's all about opinions, David. As always, thanks for coming on, mate. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care. Have a good week, pal.
Yeah, David.
Big shout out to our sponsors before we bring Mark in. Spider VPN for your internet security. They've been with us in February and continue to support us in March. Cheers to Gareth and Nathan and the lads at Spider VPN. Also a big shout out to Geordie Riffs, premium guitar lessons for beginners and children, guitar repairs and service and recording studio. Get to the website geordieriffs.co.uk and Facebook at Geordie Riffs Official. Their Instagram account, where they would like to have a few more followers, is at Geordie Riffs. Also, big thank you to John at qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle. Also have been a huge supporter of the food bank with all the stuff that they've done and making a few promotion stuff for us, including the website NUFCmatters.com. Pop on there for your t-shirts, etc. And last but by no means least, Jab Signature, who make our flyers. Got some great new boxing gear coming out in the next couple of months. Well done to John. I think he's got the investment now for his company as well. Great lad, John, and his Jab Signature gear is second to none. And if you're a first time visitor to the channel, please subscribe. Hit the Newcastle Legends badge down in the bottom right hand corner. Just click subscribe. Hit the little thumb up to like the video, because it does help us, and share to your social media by clicking the share button. If you miss any of the shows, we are on all your podcast providers such as iTunes and Spotify, and we're free on there as well. Okay, time to bring Mark in. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, guys. You all right?
Yeah, good to see you, Mark. I guess you're as depressed as all of us, trying to make sense of the mad club that is Newcastle United. You got 5 minutes, mate, but you can take a bit longer like David did if you need to, because it's understandable. People will have a lot to say, but away you go, mate. All
right, pal. Look, I mean, I think a lot of people outside the North East think we hate Steve Bruce because he used to be an ex-Sunderland manager. It's not the case. It's a case of when the guy in charge of your football club is, you're playing against a team who's 1 point against you, 1 point above you in Brighton, and they are not a good team, and we're playing against this team where we need to win, and we need to go for it. So you look at the lineup and you think, well, who's going to be playing centre forward? Are we going to play with one centre forward? Or are we going to play with 2 centre forwards? No, he doesn't play with a single recognised striker. And I'm not going to talk about Joe Linden because we've all been there, done that one, But to go up against another relegation team without a centre forward is, for me, an absolute joke. And it's stuff like that makes me. I can't stand Steve Bruce. I really, really can't. And I don't say that lightly. I don't hate the guy. I don't wish him any ill feeling. But, he's making choices that if they made some sense, and I could say, well, it's because of this or because of that, then fair enough. But you know, and then going in terms of talking about a striker, you know, everybody's hoping that Callum Wilson's going to be fit against Spurs. Now, what I know about, I've played football, and any professional striker, I'll tell you, when you've been out for a good period of time and you come back, most strikers will say it takes 4 to 5 games before you get your sharpness back. So I'm a bit concerned that, you know, everybody quite rightly is pinning the hopes on Callum Wilson to come back and score the goals. But don't get us wrong, Callum Wilson with one leg is better than Joe Linton, you know. But in saying that, I'm a bit concerned. Is he going to be fit enough? Is he going to be sharp enough? And then if he is, who's going to be the people creating the chances for a centre forward? Which I don't care if you're Harry Kane. You know, if you've got nobody supplying the ammunition, how are you going to score the goals to save your team? And I just, we all know that I'm like Steve, John Joe Shelby. How's he playing? I don't know. How's Jeff Hendrick playing? You know, and you know, you can go on and throughout the whole team, Joe Linton, another one. And I just think that this is why I despise Steve Bruce and yeah, I want him out the club. But even if you get Graham Jones to come in, which I think would happen, you know, then yeah, Graham Jones would have 8-9 games to keep up. Now, if Rafa Benitez couldn't do it with more games, how can we expect somebody like Graham Jones or anybody else to come in and keep this club up? This club and these players are fed up with the manager. That is obvious, and they're not playing for him. Yes, I agree. You know, when you're a player, you've got your own professional pride. You should go out there and give 110%. And all of them players yesterday were shocking. I can't give one player man of the match, but I think they're that fed up with the manager, and they can't understand. You know, if we supporters can't work out why he's doing A, B, or C, then I think the players are thinking the same thing. And you know, it's our football club, and we're heading towards another relegation, a third relegation under Mike Ashley, and nobody's doing anything about it. And honestly, this is why the likes of me and Steve, we've got no hair. Yeah,
and Pete.
And Pete, yeah, it's so, honestly, it's so depressing. I've wanted to come on the last couple of weeks. I've been on once before, but you know, you get to a point where you're so downbeat, and I don't want to. I don't want to watch them play like they did last night. You know, well, you think we were playing against a Manchester City? We were playing against a team with one place above win the table, 1 point above with everything to play for, and yet we made them look like world beaters, and it's not acceptable. The manager, he's got to be the luckiest manager in my over 40 years of supporting the club for me. Because how he's still in that job, I'll never ever know. And then you wake up this morning and you hear reports that he's going to keep his job, and you think, well, whatever hope we had, you know, it's gone. What hope, what chance have we got if staying up realistically? Are you hoping that Fulham lose every single game and we stay up by 2 points? Because if you have a look at the two teams, Fulham are playing better football. They've got more points over the last 6-7 games than what we have. You know, and this accumulation of points, I'm sorry, but I think every supporter's fed up with the manager saying it's all about the accumulation of points. Well, tell us something we didn't know. You know, so guys, that's my rant. I mean, you know, it's just, I'm like you guys. I support Newcastle. I bleed black and white. You know, and it's so depressing. And I'm thinking, where's the light at the end of the tunnel? And I don't know if you guys know where it is or what the answer is. I don't understand it. You know,
Mark, as always, a very eloquent rant, and you never need any notes. You always shoot straight from the heart, mate. I think, unfortunately for Newcastle in a minute, the light at the end of the tunnel is a great big train coming forward and knock us all over.
Yeah.
Nathan, what's your views on what Mark's had to say?
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. I think it's like a really good rant. I think we can immediately sort of pour cold water on the notion that it's a Sunderland connection. Why we don't like Bruce. There's been several players who've crossed the divide, both going to Sunderland and coming to Newcastle. And if we've seen those players put in a shift and we've seen those players give everything for the shirt, then it's quickly forgotten because you want what's best for your football club at any given moment in time. And if that's a player giving 110%, then brilliant. And it should be the same for a manager too. I can demonstrate exactly why we don't like Steve Bruce. We're all aware of his sort of tactical ineptness, and that's something we've talked about at length on the shows. But I saw a really interesting tweet yesterday where someone said that they took all the quotes from the last 3 times that Bruce has faced Brighton, all 3 defeats, and in each, last night, earlier on the season, and then last season as well, he said, all the quotes are exactly the same. They're all like, the way they set up their formation really surprised us today, and we weren't prepared for it. And that's what he said, like nearly identically in each 3 games. Yeah. So what that tells you everything we need to know about why we don't like Steve Bruce, because it's that lack of attention to detail, that little planning, no tactical nous whatsoever, and it's been found out. And like we talked about earlier in the season, we're riding our luck at times. Some of the points we got against like Tottenham and 1 or 2 other games, we were very lucky to get points. And we all said the luck would run out, and lo and behold, here we are on a run of 2 wins in 20. So you touched on the players like Shelby and Hendrick, why they're playing. I think it's because they don't give him a hard time. You look at the likes of Matty Longstaff and Sean Longstaff, they're frozen out of the picture because they've had something to say about what's been going on. I think there's certain players that you can't drop, like Wilson and stuff. I'm sure they're not very happy about moving to this club to play for Bruce. But last night the tactics were awful. Fraser up front into one of the biggest and best centre halves in the league was just it's just ridiculous, isn't it? That's entirely why we don't like Steve Bruce.
Yeah, Pete, what's your views on what Mark's had to say?
Firstly, I love listening to you, Mark. You like I say,
job somebody does.
Sorry?
The good job somebody does.
No, honestly, the points that you've made are exactly, I think, how a lot of us are feeling today. For me, I think we've known, going back from last season, that Bruce is not a good manager. We knew it before he even came to the club. That's not even under sort of negotiation in any way, shape, or form. Everyone was very clear on that. But I think at the point in which fans started to turn on Steve Bruce and not like him as a person is when he started pointing the finger at the fans and the mention of histrionics and things like that just before the quarter final. I think that was the point where the fans went, hold on a second, but why are you pointing the finger at us for these rubbish, drab performances that we're having to sit through and watch week in, week out? And the fans have just said, no, we're not having this. Enough's enough. And I think that was the point. And ever since then, I think there's been a lot more finger pointing from the fans towards Steve Bruce. I think there's been a hell of a lot more scrutiny about the way in which he goes about his business. Nathan's talked about the press conferences. The press conferences are regurgitated from his Villa days, from his Sheffield Wednesday days, from his Hull days. And it's been well documented. And there are fans from those opposition clubs that have actually forwarded on those press conferences in the words that he said, and they're actually absolutely spot on with what he's saying right now. And it's like he's got his notebook from over his 40 years of football, and he's just literally, what can I say today that's slightly different? And it went through the period of the 2 Arsenal games around the January time, the 2 Arsenal games and the Sheffield United game, where he was just getting to a point where he just wanted to say something different, just for something different for the reporters to talk about. And he was just spouting the most absolute nonsense just to get a reaction. The gloves are off and all these different things. And it was just like, hold on.
He's got to do with his way.
Honestly, it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. And it just got to that point where enough was enough, and the fans have been on him, and rightly so, and obviously other people are seeing it now. With regards to the players, look, as it's already been mentioned, you've got certain players in the squad that feel very fortunate and I'm saying that mildly, they feel very fortunate that they are getting minutes at a Premier League club, that they are getting minutes in this Newcastle team, and the reason why is because they're not standing up to him. They feel very fortunate that they're there. And the ones that are not getting in the team, like your Matt Ritchies and your Longstaffs and your Andy Carrolls and your Dwight Gales, they're the ones that are turning around and saying, hold on, this isn't good enough. What we're doing that right now, whether it's the training, whether it's the performances on the pitch, whether it's the team selection, you can bet that those players are going up to Bruce and saying, nah, this is not right. What are you doing? And the likes of Hendricks and the likes of Shelby and the likes of one or two others are not questioning him because they just feel fortunate that they're getting game time. And I think that's the difference. He doesn't like people questioning him. He thinks because he's been in the game so long that what he says goes. And actually, he is completely so far away from what the modern manager needs to be that actually these players have an absolute right to question him about his ability. To manage this team and his selections. And I think that's a lot of what's happening right now. And I think it was talked about earlier, this tug of war between Graham Jones and Steve Bruce. And I think that's what it is, because Graham Jones can see what the problems are, but he's not the manager. He doesn't have the final say. And he's suggesting things like he suggested the tactics, which is still being stuck to. But if Steve Bruce is having the final say on the picking of the players and who's starting the games, these tactics can effectively go out the window, because if he's not selecting the players that Graham Jones feels are best suited,
you're right.
It doesn't mean anything. The performances are still going to be drab. We're still going to be losing games, which is exactly what's happening.
Okay, I've got to cut you off now, Mark. But listen, thanks as always for your points. Got a couple of people ready to come on. Big thanks to you, mate. I'm sure we'll see you again soon. You take care, mate.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, mate. We've got FLETCH, who is next, and then we've got Graham. So we'll bring FLETCH in. FLETCH, can you hear us?
Oh, I can hear you,
yeah, go for it, mate. I've just got your private message in the private chat as well.
Yeah, that's what it was all about, really, just as a form of protest. Just a little idea, something you can maybe make happen because of all your contacts. Like a big fan park or something similar when home games are on next season. Just so we're not giving cash our money, you know what I mean?
I mean, listen, it's a good shout, FLETCH. I mean, you know, I've got to be honest. I do know just from speaking to the likes of Steve Hasty, who was on the fans forum, it was actually something the club were looking at doing at one point before COVID. They were looking at potentially utilising the area next to St James's Park, in the car park opposite the Sandman Signature, looking at potentially putting on gigs down there and, you know, like putting bands on or speakers or whatever and doing pre-match. But as with a lot of things with this club, nothing ever seems to move forward under this owner. But look, FLETCH, I think once we get back to some kind of normality, I think that if we're in that horrendous position where we do have, where we do have him still in charge, if the takeover doesn't go through, this is, you know, I think there will be a lot of people coming up with different ideas. I mean, is that something you would go to, FLETCH?
Oh, definitely, definitely, without a doubt. Remember the shindig?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, to be honest, I think anything which is an alternative to the football, I think is probably what.
Set that up.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. I think a lot of people would probably look at going somewhere that not go to the match. Though, Nathan, would you go to something like that FLETCH is, you know, coming out with, you know, like an alternative, if you like, and something not to give the money? Because look, 10,000 people walked away before COVID. As I've already said, there'll be a lot more people walk away if this takeover doesn't go through as well. And if we've still got somebody of the caliber of Steve Bruce's manager, I can see it happening.
Well, yeah, that's the hope, isn't it? The hope that when home games are back, and I think it's going to be probably quite a while in the future where we're in a position where there's going to be a full capacity coming to the stadium. But, you know, I would hope that by that time that this kind of situation that we're in now, Bruce in charge and Ashley as the owner, I would hope that maybe will have hopefully resolved itself by that point. I think in terms of what you mentioned about the club, we're thinking of doing something similar. I know from going on the Burnley games with some of my friends, they've done something similar outside, and it's really improved the atmosphere at the club, because what it does, it gets people in and around the stadium before, you know, for an hour before the game, as opposed to people just sort of trickling in from the local pubs, 5 minutes before kick-off. It helps with the atmosphere tremendously. So, yeah, I think it'd be a really good idea. But in terms of like doing things in protest, I think, I would hope that by the time sort of full houses and full attendances come back around, that Ashley and Bruce have cleared off, I would hope.
Yeah, Pete, what's your take on that?
I'd love it. I think it's a great idea, and any Newcastle fan that's been to the Etihad Stadium, that's exactly what they do. They have that fanfare outside and in and around the stadium. They have the live bands, they've got the drink areas, they've got the areas where you can just kind of get together. Sometimes they'll have the screens up if there's other games on or whatever, and you can really sort of soak in that atmosphere. And even those that are going into the stadium can still be in and around the area and really feel the buzz of the game and get everyone. It kind of gets everyone excited, although there's not really much to be excited about at the moment. But still, it just gives you that togetherness. And for those not going to the game, or for those fans that we've talked about before that refuse to go back under Mike Ashley's ownership, it's the perfect opportunity for them to still be part of a match day without actually going into the stadium and forking out that money to do that. For me, I think it's a great idea, and we've talked about it before. Steve, you've talked about the buzz of a match day and your normal routines and where you go, a few beers with your mates in the pub, and the chatter and all that stuff. That can still take place. That it still allows that to happen, and I think it's a great idea if it was able to be sort of like. If it was able to come to fruition, really.
I think Fletch has hit the nail on the head. If we do end up in this position, there will be call for that. I mean, I'm old enough to remember United supporters for change. Obviously, I think the attendance for the Leeds game when Mickey Quinn got 4 was something in the region of 23,000, which was obviously a good 13,000 below our capacity at the time. And they were putting on games from days gone by. They were putting the 74 Cup semi-final on video at the somewhere like the Labour Club, and alternatives being made so that you could still go out and meet your mates, but you went to watch days gone by, and I can see that happening again. I know it's sad, but I can see it happening. I was speaking to somebody who still works at the club this week, and they are concerned about coming out of COVID, and they are concerned essentially about what will the situation be? How many fans will go back? And they've got to start looking at alternatives as well. I mean, why else would they be continuing to put the rugby and stuff on? They need to start thinking out of the box for bringing money in once fans can go back to the ground. But no, Fletch, listen, I get your point. I think it's a good idea. I know for a fact a lot of my mates would go along just for the beer and a bit crack and go and either go to something else, some alternative. Paul Patterson suggesting a big screen at Gateshead. I think they could spring up all over the place, to be perfectly honest, if the football stays as bad as this, if Steve Bruce is still manager and Mike Ashley still owner. Anything else to say, Fletch, tonight?
No, that's it. That's great. That's just me point. Cheers, mate.
Great stuff, mate. Thanks for coming on. Great suggestion, mate. You stay safe. Have a good week, pal. Take care.
Cheers, Fletch.
Take care.
Good to have Fletch on. Good to see new faces. And it's over to Graham. Good evening, Graham.
Hello, Steve. Can you hear me?
We can, mate. Yeah, good to see you again, mate. Thanks for coming back on. What's your points that you want to make tonight, mate? You'll probably see the show out tonight, so we'll give you the last 10 minutes with us
10
and the
hours,
guys.
Steve. You got to that right. I got the email off John from QTech because I got the what do you call it? The NUFC Matters keyring.
Oh, well done, mate. Congratulations. Yeah, big thanks to John for doing that little giveaway on Friday night on the Three Amigos. But yeah, go on. What's your points tonight then, mate?
Yeah, Steve, I tell you what it is last night, and I watched it on the Sky, that team, and I'm resigned now that Newcastle are going down. Steve Bruce has done exactly what Ashley wants, just in 17th place. He doesn't want them to go any higher, and he's just flirting with the relegation. Right? And there was just no fight. There's nothing in that team that it's just beyond belief. I just cannot believe for the life of me why Ashley's came out, or the clubs came out saying they're going to keep with Bruce. Right? It's just nothing. We're down, and I'm accepting that. if they get Graham Jones, we can accept that when he came in for the first couple of weeks, he did G that team up. The rot is in. Fulham, you're guaranteed what's going to happen with Fulham on the last day of the season. Basically, they're going to leapfrog us. Not with that team. There's just no fight. There's nothing in it. There's no, I just cannot believe how bad that is sunk. And it's been coming for a while. And to continue with Bruce, or even change the manager now, I just think it's a bit too late. Ashley is gambling on us staying up. And it just ain't going to happen.
Any other points, mate?
No, it's just, if the club turned round and said, Charlie, Ashley, I'm not banking on takeover now, right? I'm just not banking on it. It's just basically, and I've said that before the last time I came on, is that in order to get rid of Ashley, that club has got to go down and build itself back up.
That's the way I felt at the last relegation, Graham. I've got to be perfectly honest. When we're struggling, I thought we would go down, and that would be the rebirth of the club. And I think probably a lot of people have even been on the show in the past and said, we might have to drop as far as Sunderland's depths to try and get this guy out. But that is a risk. It could see the end of the football club. You just, especially in these COVID times, we just don't know whether you'd be able to survive financially. I have been, one of Ashley's biggest critics, but at the end of the day, he hasn't got us into a lot of debt in the sense that he's given us interest-free loans, and we won't really know the true damage or how well he has run the football club until he goes. Do you know what I mean? And pretty similar with Freddie Shepherd and Douglas Hall. I mean, they left the club with a huge gaping hole in the finances, and because Ashley didn't do due diligence, that was the reason that Mike Ashley was always playing catch up with his club. It's probably the reason why he's never spent as much money as he maybe intended to at the start. But remember when he came to the club, what he said, I keep harking back to this, in the old United magazine, the club magazine, which we all used to get as season ticket holders, which of course Ashley stopped very soon after. But it was an 8-page interview he gave in there, and the one paragraph which stands out amongst them all is he just said, "I have bought Newcastle United to promote my sports brand globally." That's what he said. That's
fair enough, and I take your point. But if you look at it, Ashley has never repaid the debt off which he was originally with the club.
No, he hasn't. You're right. Yeah, I mean, as I say, we won't know the full damage or the success of having him as manager. We're not millions of pounds. We're not millions of pounds in debt or billions of pounds in debt like Man United, Chelsea. If things go bump with the Premier League, those clubs could go out of business. They're about, I think, Man United was, the last time I heard, was £750 million in debt. I think Chelsea must be similar. And if those clubs, if their owners pulled the plug, it'd be an absolute nightmare. Nathan, what do you think? It's an interesting discussion. Mike Ashley is always an interesting discussion. He's got away with being the villain of the piece for the last 12 months, really, because everyone's eyes are focused on Steve Bruce. But if Steve Bruce went tomorrow, we'd all be looking at who Mike Ashley appointed, but we'd also be looking at, it is Mike Ashley who's caused all of this, isn't it, really?
It is, yeah. It's the accumulation of 15 years of negligence, isn't it? Really, he's let his asset that he's spent his own hard-earned money on. He's let that degrade to a point where over the previous years we've seen pictures of our players in wheelie bins full of water and stuff on hot days and stuff, and it's just not the image of a Premier League club, isn't it? It just stinks of underfunding and cutting corners, and we've been run essentially just like one of his business empires. I work as a web developer, and I work for an agency that deals with quite big retail companies, and Sports Director, one of our clients, and the feeling I get from the people that work closely with Sports Directors is that they're always asking for more. We have a set amount of contracted hours they're always asking for more. They're always asking for things done differently. They're always trying to squeeze as much as they can out of us as a resource to them. And that's exactly, you wouldn't expect any different of a Mark Ashley business, would you? They get the most they can for the little amount of money paid, and that's the way they work. That's the way that they work, unfortunately.
I do feel that he's just washed his hands in the club for good now.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's for me. I was always quite confident of us staying up, rolling back a couple of weeks, even with those draws that we got against Villa and before that. I was quite confident of us staying up. Last night, I was confident that we'd win. I thought if we played the way that we have been playing in recent weeks, we've been pressing really high up the pitch with a nice amount of intensity, and that's given us some. We've been further up the pitch, and we haven't looked in trouble for a couple of those games, especially against Wolves and against Villa. We didn't look in trouble in either of those games. But the performance yesterday, there was no pressing. That pressing didn't exist yesterday. We let them attack, and as soon as we got the ball back, we punted it back to them. It was clear that the players weren't doing what they've been doing in previous games. Why? Have they down tools, or have they been told to do something different? That intensity should still be there, regardless of what kind of system we're playing. So it screamed to me that they'd sort of down tools last night. So after the game, I was really disappointed after the game yesterday, and I felt that even though I was really disappointed, it was kind of like a bit of a watershed moment, because like I said earlier on, if you looked at the way that the media had mobilised against Steve Bruce, the local journalists and even the national media, they're all weaponised and they're all against him and they're all saying it's time for him to go. So I thought, going to bed last night, I thought, yeah, it's shit that we lost, but I thought I'm going to wake up tomorrow and there's going to be some sort of movement either Sunday or Monday. But then to wake up to that that media report yesterday about him, about Ashley backing him, to me, that spells the end for us in this division for me.
Pete, over to you. Just got a couple of more minutes to go.
Look, we all know that Ashley is the root of the problem. And look, we've had 14 years of it of bad decisions, where we've been in good places, like the time we finished fifth. That was the time to really invest and really push us forward, and he didn't. He's made just bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, and it's continuous. And that's why the fans have had enough of him. But for me personally, over this last year, particularly this season, what we are in right now with our team, like hurtling towards relegation, is down to Steve Bruce. It has to be, because it's about what happens on the pitch. You have to set up your players to play a certain way to get results, and Steve Bruce hasn't done that. That element of it is not down to Mike Ashley. Mike Ashley invested in Callum Wilson, Jamal Lewis, and one or two other players. Okay, it's about what Steve Bruce does. If Steve Bruce had got a result at Leeds, if Steve Bruce had beat Sheffield United, we were the only team to lose to him at that point in the season, right? If Steve Bruce gets points against Leeds United, all games we could have got points against, all games that we could have won, you go back to West Brom being defensive and getting a 0-0 draw. You go back to Aston Villa, you go back to Wolves. That is not on Mike Ashley. That is on Steve Bruce. And if he gets that right, we are comfortable in this league, and we are talking about the takeover or who we're going to sign next season still being a Premier League club. It sits with him, right? It comes to the point where Mike Ashley comes in right now, and I think this is why we're starting to talk about Mike Ashley in the last week or so, is because he should have pulled the trigger. Okay, he should have got rid of him. Okay, and this is where Mike Ashley comes back into the picture now, is because as an owner, he's talked about as a great businessman. He's talked about as this really astute, very, very good businessman, earns a lot of money. But I'm sorry, right? If he's a good businessman, he would be proactive. He'd be able to see these signs before they started to come about, just like the fans did back in November, October time, when we said, this is not right. We're only going one way here. If he'd have saw it like we'd saw it all those months ago, we wouldn't have been in this position right now. And so that's where he fits into it. But ultimately on the pitch, it lies with Steve Bruce. And it's because he's not good enough to be manager of this club.
Yeah. Great stuff. Great stuff. Yeah, go on. One last point, Graham, before we finish.
Yeah. We're going to be entering our third relegation, right? And it happened with Alan Shearer when he was appointed manager. He didn't have time. Rafa Benitez, he didn't have time. And I dread to think. Well, I'm not saying dread. I'm like, what's the word I'm looking for now? Is that I'm going to be accustomed that they're going down, but Ashley has not learned these lessons. Yes, I accept the fact that Bruce is just not good enough. I accept that, but do you not think that it should have started at the top through not learning these lessons previously?
Yeah, it's one to ponder on. Graham, as always, thanks for your points, mate. Look forward to seeing you on again. You have a good week. Enjoy the international break.
Yeah.
Take care, mate.
Take care,
Great to have so many ranters on. Nathan, Pete, great show as always. Thanks for stepping in, Nathan, at short notice, mate. Much appreciated.
Been a pleasure. No, thank you for having me.
Good stuff. I'm back tomorrow night, 7:30 for ladies' night, 7:30 till 8:30, and all the shows this week will be on at the normal time. We've got Liam Kennedy on Tuesday night. Wednesday night, the Retro Show will be looking at games against Birmingham City. Thursday night will be Super Mac, and then we'll be back to the Three Amigos at the weekend on Friday. But until then, until tomorrow night, bid you good night. Have a good night, Pete. Have a good night, Nathan. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you much. You too.
Head back with the critics' attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again. But it's